Hey, Father John Muir here. Welcome to Catholic Breakfast. We are doing this series on Abraham. It's the call of God, the call of Abraham in a messy world. And today it's going to get real messy. It's how we handle the messiness of the world as we try to do God's will in our lives. Well, the drama is just getting intense for Abraham. He's been called to do God's will. He's been pushed to his limit by famine and war, by the struggles with his own wife, by his own sinfulness, and he's encountered divine mercy, and now he encounters the real messiness of the world around him. And when we watch what God does with him, it's a real lesson for us how to handle the messiness of the world, the sinfulness of the world, the injustice around us. The first thing here is that Abraham's really dealt with a lot of the messiness and injustice in his own heart. We saw that with him trying to have a baby with his maid woman. And he repented. Circumcision is a kind of sign of his repentance that he wants God's will to be done, but on God's terms. Good. Things are about to get worse around him, and he's going to be called to deal with this in a particular way. It's chapter 18 of the book of Genesis. So he has encountered these angelic figures, God's presence, angels, and given hospitality to them. But things around him are about to get really bad. In verse 16 it says, "The men set out from there and they looked towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, 'Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham shall become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by him?'" That's God's question, right? So, in other words, Abraham's got this great call. He's trying to do God's will. And God is sort of rhetorically asking himself here, should I hide from Abraham how screwed up the world is, how unjust the world is, how much violence, how much sin, how much darkness is in the world? Here's God's response. And see yourself as Abraham here, right? The Lord is asking, should I hide from you the misery and the pain of the world around you? Here's God's response. No. For I have chosen him, that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. In other words, it can be very helpful for us to see and to engage the injustice of the world around us. In fact, in some ways, it's essential for us to know the consequences of our freedom, of when we use our freedom well and when we use our freedom badly. Then the Lord said, "Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry which has come to me, and if not, I will know." In other words, it's sort of a rhetorical device here, right? God is being presented as someone who's like, I've heard what's going on down there is really, really bad, and I got to see it with my own two eyes. So, what's going on in Sodom? Well, the short version of the summary of it is it's massive injustice, violence against guests, violence against the weak, sexual sin, sexual violence, families being ripped apart, children being exploited and handed over to sexual crimes. Does any of this sound familiar? If you want the details, take a look at it in chapter 19, where Lot is handing over his own daughters to be sexually exploited, where angels of God are being handed over to essentially group sexual violence. The Bible knows human depravity and what mobs can do, and how sexual promiscuity can press forward to some of the most degrading forms of violence that the human imagination is capable of grasping. All of that, God isn't holding back from Abraham, because Abraham has a call even in that. The call of Abraham isn't just to be tiptoeing through the daisies and just to be having a great time. It's to help make the world just and make the world right. How does Abraham do that? It's really important to know that, because it's our call too. Two things. The first thing is intercessory prayer. And that's where we see that in that rare, very wonderful, almost comedic, and it's almost like comedic relief, because this is a very dark part of the story. It's in chapter 18, and that's where Abraham drew near to God and says, wilt thou to the Lord, wilt thou indeed destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou then destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? In other words, sin, deception, violence, etc., all these forms of human dysfunction, they don't just hurt the people who do it. They hurt the innocent. And that's what Abraham is seeing. Lord, when you bring the justice to those who are guilty, other people are going to get hurt too. Man, is that true. Pope Francis says a lot that it's always the poor who suffer the worst because of the sins of the strong. And it seems to me just a kind of truism. Abraham sees that, and he's voicing that to God. Lord, when justice comes, it's going to hurt. The poor are going to be hurt. The innocent are going to be hurt. Kids are going to be hurt. Those who had nothing to do with this are going to be hurt. The whole community is going to bear this. So what does he do? He does this little prayer I just read. Lord, will you spare the whole city for 50 righteous people? And it's this beautiful back and forth. It's kind of like street bartering, Hey, what about 45, 40, 35? Abraham keeps bargaining. When we see the messiness of the world, is our instinct to beg God to spare everyone for the sake of the innocent? I think, if I'm honest with myself, I think most of the times my instinct is to say, Lord, I don't care who gets hurt. I want vengeance. I want vengeance on the people who did the terrible things. That's not Abraham's instinct. It's very interesting to think. I think, a few chapters before, that's probably what Abraham would have done. But because he's become maybe aware of the evil in his own heart, his instinct in some ways is to say, Lord, I know that you can actually transform the situation. And here's the kind of Christ figure, isn't he? Like Christ on the cross, bearing in his own body now the marks of infidelity. In his circumcision, Christ, it's the marks of his wounds on the cross. Now interceding for those who don't deserve the mercy. It's a beautiful, beautiful passage. Is that our instinct to intercede? Now, what's the second thing that Abraham does here? And it's this. I'll sum it up in one line. Get out of there. Is there a danger sometimes when we become so fixated on the evil around us, the evil in the news, the evil we see on cable TV, the evil in the newspaper, the evil we see in social media, to sort of fixate on it? And in that we sort of get drawn into it and we start to take the evil on in an unhealthy way. Absolutely. Absolutely. He intercedes, and then God says, eventually, look, I want you to go. Get your wife, get your daughters, get your crew, and go. And don't look back. Remember that part of the reading here? Don't look back. In other words, don't look back out of curiosity. Maybe I'm looking back at the evil like, I remember the good old days when I had those bad things in my life, and they actually were kind of nice, right? All these different ways we can kind of take evil into our hearts. Or maybe it's just, I can't wait I sort of want to see people get punished for the bad things happening in their lives, taking pleasure in people's misfortune, even moral misfortunes. Don't do it. That's what God is saying to Abraham. Don't do it. Don't look back. So we intercede, Lord, please spare these people in this situation. Bring your mercy, bring your justice. But then get out of there. And I don't mean necessarily, but don't fixate on it. Don't look back. Move on about your day. Get onto what you should be doing in your life. That's what Abraham is doing here. How do we deal with the messiness in the world? First, God is going to expose us to it so that we can help be part of the solution. And we do that in two ways. Intercessory prayer, like Christ, in and with Christ himself on the cross. And then thirdly, move on. Don't fixate on it. Get going about God's will in your life. God bless you.